Welcome back to the Deep Dives.
Glad to be here for this one.
Yeah, today we have a really fascinating mission for you. We're exploring what the sources call the architecture of centricity.
It's a heavy title, but the concepts are incredibly practical.
Very practical. And we've got a great stack of theological texts on the table today to help us. We're pulling from excerpts of Abba, the Theology of Intimate Sonship, a text called Anchored in the Hub, and a piece titled Beyond the Ladder.
All of which, they really push back on how we typically structure our lives.
Right. Because most of you joining us are probably well acquainted with the frustration of the old way. You know the drill. It's the ranking model.
Oh, the classic priority list.
Exactly. You try to balance your faith, your family, your career, your personal time, and you put them in this need-numbered list.
Which sounds great in theory.
It sounds perfect. But inevitably, you feel this friction, priority conflict. So, okay, let's unpack this. Why does that old ladder completely fail us when we try to integrate our faith in our daily lives?
Well, it fails because the traditional framework simply doesn't hold up under the weight of, actual human existence.
Yeah.
We talked a bit about the ruins of that ranking model in our last discussion, but it's worth bringing the core flaw into focus again before we build this new architecture. The default human habit is to say, okay, God is number one, family is number two, work is number three, and as you said, it sounds incredibly pious. It sounds like the right answer for Sunday school.
Right, but structurally,
it's a disaster.
Because when you put God at number one on a sequential list, you're creating an inherent competition for limited resources.
Exactly. Time, energy, mental bandwidth, they are all finite.
So if I have a finite amount of hours in a week, and I give 50 of them to my career,
which sits down at number 3 on your list.
Right. I'm left with this lingering low-grade guilt that I've actively stolen those hours from my number one priority.
You're robbing the top of the list to feed the bottom. It's a zero-sum game.
It's exhausting. You're constantly trying to balance a scale that is just fundamentally broken. And the texts we're looking at today highlight this with a really brilliant piece of illustrative content.
I love this example. It perfectly captures the absurdity of the ranking system.
It does. It's a reference to a social media reel, a little comedy sketch that went viral a while back. A young woman looks at her boyfriend and asks, "Am I number one in your heart?"
And the boyfriend, fully believing he's passing the test.
Oh, he thinks he's nailed it.
He smiles and says, "Of course. You are absolutely number one."
Because it's the socially programmed response. It's what you're supposed to say.
But the trap springs immediately. The girlfriend's expression drops. She crosses her arms and fires back, "Oh. Then who is number 2?
Who is number 3?
And who is number 4?
And the guy is just left entirely speechless.
Because he realizes the logical corner he just painted himself into. By accepting the premise that she is number 1, he implicitly agreed that there is a list.
And that she's simply at the top of a roster of competitors.
Oh, right.
That perfectly illustrates what the sources call the ranking trap in our theology. If we turn to God and say, "You are my number one priority,"
we are logically implying that the creator of the universe is in a foot race with, say, a mid-level management job.
Or your golf handicap. Or your retirement portfolio. We're placing the divine in the exact same categorical bucket as a Tuesday morning staff meeting.
Which is the ultimate category error. The texts point out that by making God a competitor in a race, even if you crown him the victor, you've diminished his nature.
Right.
Consider the name God gives himself in Exodus, YHWH, the I AM. He is the creator of all systems. He doesn't enter into a human ranking system, nor does he compete for a slot on your calendar.
So that brings us to the core proposition from our sources. The solution to this perpetual friction, the centricity model.
Yes. In this architecture, God is not the first item on a list. He is the first and foremost reality that permeates absolutely everything else.
Permeates everything. That requires a total rewiring of how you perceive your daily life.
It really does.
Because we're moving from viewing God as a priority, which is really just a daily human choice. I mean, my priorities depend heavily on how much sleep I got or how busy my week is.
Totally subjective.
Exactly. We move from that subjective priority to viewing God as lordship, which the text define as an objective, unchangeable reality.
To borrow an analogy from the reading, he isn't the best item on the menu. He owns the restaurant.
I love that. He owns the restaurant. So the goal for you listening to this today is to help you visualize this new architecture. We are deconstructing that broken ladder.
tearing it down.
And replacing it with a model where the sacred-secular split simply ceases to exist. There is no more dividing your week into church time versus real-world time.
And to help us grasp this, the sources provide a few really robust frameworks. They start with a mechanical metaphor, the hub and the spokes.
This is from the text anchored in the hub, right?
Yeah.
This is where it gets incredibly practical.
Yes. If the latter is gone, we need a new shape for our lives. The sources suggest a circle. Imagine your life as a wheel.
Okay, a wheel.
In this model, the central axis, the hub, is God. And the various dimensions of your life, the things that demand your time and attention, like your career, your marriage, financial planning, hobbies, friendships, those are all the spokes.
The geometry here is vital. The text is very specific about the nature of the connection between the hub and the spokes.
It is. Every single spoke must connect directly to the center. The author calls this direct tethering.
Let's push on that concept of direct tethering for a second, because I think the natural human tendency is to connect our lives sequentially, even if we're using a wheel metaphor instead of a ladder.
What do you mean by sequentially?
Like, we might think, okay, my spiritual life connects to God, and then my spiritual life informs how I treat my family, and then my family's stability allows me to do well at my job.
Ah, right. It becomes a game of spiritual telephone.
Exactly, a sequential flow. But the sources are arguing against that kind of downstream flow, aren't they?
They are completely dismantling it. Direct tethering means you do not connect to God through your family, and you do not connect to God after you've satisfied the demands of your career.
It's direct.
Every single aspect of who you are, every role you play, must have its own unmediated connection to the central hub. And the reason for this becomes clear when we look at the actual physics of a wheel.
The author of Anchored in the Hub spends a significant amount of time detailing this. Break down the physics for us. Why does the direct connection matter mechanically?
Well, a hub isn't merely a static point of intersection where spokes happen to meet. In mechanical engineering, the hub is the point that manages the energy and distributes the load.
Okay.
As a wheel turns, it generates centrifugal force. That's an outward energy pulling away from the center. For a wheel to maintain its integrity under the stress of high speeds or rough terrain, the hub has to be incredibly strong.
And every spoke has to be anchored into it to receive that stabilizing tension.
Precisely. When every dimension of your life is anchored directly to the core reality of God's lordship, your life can bear the immense weight of a complex, modern existence. It achieves a dynamic, balanced harmony.
Because the energy to sustain your marriage or your career doesn't actually come from the marriage or the career itself.
No, it's drawn outward from the central hub.
But the reality is, we constantly mess with the mechanics.
Yeah.
We all have moments, or sometimes entire decades, where we disconnect the spoke from the center and try to promote it.
Oh, absolutely.
So what happens, according to the sources,
Yeah.
when someone takes their career spoke or their desire for financial independence and attempts to install it as the hub?
The texts refer to that as creating a false hub. And the mechanical consequences are entirely predictable. If you take a spoke, let's say, your career, and force it into the center, the wheel loses its true source of stabilization.
Because a career can't generate that kind of force.
It can't. A career cannot generate the necessary centrifugal force to hold a human life together. It doesn't have the structural integrity. So as you try to roll this wheel through the pressures of daily life, it becomes unbalanced. It begins to wobble.
That wobble is a highly relatable symptom. I think everyone listening knows exactly what that wobble feels like in their own life.
That's a visceral feeling.
It's that creeping sense of anxiety.
Yeah.
The chronic burnout, that feeling that you are running at top speed, but everything is constantly on the verge of spinning out of control.
The wobble is the earliest indicator of a structural failure. If you're using human admiration or financial accumulation as your center, the energy distribution is chaotic.
And eventually.
The texts argue that eventually a wheel operating with a false hub will suffer a catastrophic collapse under load. The pressure simply snaps the remaining spokes.
Oh, let's ground this in a practical scenario so we can see how direct tethering actually functions on, say, a random Tuesday afternoon.
Sure.
The sources anchor this idea in the biblical mandate found in Colossians 3:23. It states that whatever you do, you should work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human master.
Right.
If we apply that to the work spoke, how does the hub metaphor change the experience of a grueling corporate job?
If your work is a false hub, or if it's disconnected from the center, then your motivation is entirely horizontal. You're working solely for the paycheck or the promotion, or to satisfy a demanding boss.
And that horizontal energy is finite.
It's finite and easily depleted. You burn out. But if that work spoke is directly tethered to the true hub, the nature of the labor transforms. The text argues that the work itself, regardless of how mundane it might seem, becomes an integrated act of worship.
Okay, so if I'm staring at a massive, complex spreadsheet,
Mm-hmm.
or dealing with a client who's being completely unreasonable.
Very real scenarios.
The traditional secular view says I just grit my teeth and get through it so I can go home to my real life.
Right.
But the centricity model suggests that the patience I exercise with that client, or the integrity I bring to that data entry, is receiving its energy from the hug.
It ceases to be a secular grind. When you write an email with honesty, when you manage a team with compassion, you are actively participating in the lordship of Christ in that exact moment.
You aren't waiting until Sunday to do something sacred.
Exactly. The mundane task is elevated to a sacred act because of where it's anchored. The energy you use to endure the difficult client isn't coming from a forced artificial patience. It's drawing on the infinite resources of the sender.
That completely redefines how we view our daily output.
It changes everything about a Tuesday afternoon.
It really does. Now, the wheel metaphor does an incredible job of explaining dynamic energy and connection. But as I look at my own life, the way I organize my time doesn't always feel like a spinning wheel.
How does it feel?
It often feels much more physical, like I'm walking into different rooms or opening different boxes depending on the day of the week.
Ah, yes. Compartmentalization.
Do the sources address that physical separation, that human urge to categorize our time into neat little compartments?
They do. And this leads us into the second major framework the texts explore. While the wheel explains the distribution of energy, it doesn't fully capture the spatial and structural ways we try to manage our reality.
Right.
For that, the sources transition to a different metaphor entirely. The cabinet, or as some of the authors refer to it, the dresser.
The dresser metaphor feels incredibly pointed. It targets this modern habit we've all cultivated, this illusion of the compartmentalized life.
It's a very common illusion.
We imagine our life as this large piece of furniture.
Mm-hmm.
And we decide, based on our ranking model, that God is the most important. So naturally, we assign him the top drawer.
The premium real estate. The sacred drawer.
Right. We give him the best drawer. And maybe we pull that drawer open for an hour on Sunday morning. Maybe we crack it open for 15 minutes on a Thursday morning while we drink our coffee and read a devotional.
You interact with the contents, you feel spiritually satisfied.
And then we push it firmly shut.
And once it's shut, the compartmentalization begins in earnest.
Exactly. Because once the top drawer is closed, we move down the dresser and start pulling open the secular drawers.
The Monday to Friday career drawer.
The Friday night social life drawer. The investment and financial planning drawer. And we manage the contents of those secular drawers completely independently of the top drawer.
We use different rules, different ethics, a completely different mindset.
It's wild when you think about it.
It is, but it's a psychological coping mechanism. It's a direct response to the priority conflict we discussed earlier. If you keep the categories hermetically sealed from one another, they can't compete.
Right. Your faith doesn't have to challenge your business practices if they live in different drawers.
Exactly. But the theological and ontological reality presented in these texts entirely dismantles this approach.
Let's define that term for the listener, because ontological reality is a heavy phrase. What exactly are the sources getting at there?
Ontology is the philosophical study of being, of existence itself. When the texts say this is an ontological issue, they mean this isn't just a debate about how you schedule your calendar or prioritize your daily tasks.
It's deeper than that.
It's about the fundamental structural nature of what is real. The sources argue that we have deeply misunderstood our own metaphor. God doesn't want the top drawer.
Right.
He isn't asking for the most prestigious compartment in your life. Ontologically speaking, he's the whole dresser.
He's the wood. He is the frame. He is the structure itself.
Let's take the metaphor to its logical, physical conclusion. Think about a standard chest of drawers. If you were to magically remove the outer frame, the solid wood casing, the load-bearing supports, the glides that hold the drawers in place, what would happen to all those carefully organized boxes?
They would collapse instantly. Gravity would take over, and you'd just have a chaotic, shattered pile of wood, clothes, and documents scattered across the floor.
Because the drawers only exist as functional spaces because the cabinet holds them in tension.
Precisely. Without the overarching structure of the cabinet, the drawers have no context, no support, no order. They cannot function independently.
The theological argument here is that God's sovereignty is the structure of your reality. His authority, his lordship, is what gives your life any semblance of order.
He's the piece of furniture holding everything you are together.
He is the Alpha and the Omega, the foundation and the limit.
But practically speaking, doesn't that feel almost invasive? I think part of the reason people cling to compartmentalization is that they desperately want a secular drawer just to decompress.
We all crave that autonomy.
We feel like we need spaces where we are the sole architect, where we don't have to carry the heavy weight of the sacred.
It only feels invasive if you're still viewing reality through the old ranking lens, where God is this demanding manager hovering over your shoulder, criticizing how you fold the clothes in your secular drawers.
He's micromanaging the Tuesday drawer?
Exactly. The texts are trying to liberate us from that exact anxiety by proving that the unsacred space is a complete illusion. We invented the concept of the secular to give ourselves little fiefdoms where we feel we have ultimate control.
But if the cabinet metaphor holds true, every square inch of the dresser belongs to the same owner.
So the implication is that even our attempts to hide from the sacred are happening within the sacred.
Wow. When I pull open the work drawer on a high-stress Tuesday afternoon, I'm not stepping outside of God's jurisdiction.
No, you are still reaching your hands inside the exact same cabinet.
When I open the money drawer to calculate my taxes, I'm interacting with the inner walls of his structure. I'm still touching the reality of his presence and his values.
You cannot leave God at church any more than a drawer can leave the dresser and still function as a drawer. Your time at the gym, your agonizing commute in heavy traffic, your romantic relationships, your quiet moments of reflection.
They all exist inside the framework of the divine.
There is no escaping the structure, which means there is no unsacred ground. Every mundane act is occurring within a sacred architecture.
It's a massive paradigm shift.
Truly.
We've looked at the hub and the spokes, which redefines how we manage our energy and connection. We've looked at the cabinet, which destroys the illusion of compartmentalized space. But the sources keep pushing the boundaries of how we perceive reality.
They don't stop there.
No. The text from the Illumination of Being ask us to move away from solid objects entirely. Wheels and cabinets are still tangible things. The authors argue that to truly understand centricity, we have to talk about the medium of reality itself. We have to talk about light and air.
Moving from solid structures to mediums like light and air brilliantly exposes the final lingering flaws of the ranking model.
Walk us through it.
Imagine you're standing in a large room filled with heavy furniture. You have a sofa that represents your family. You have a massive oak desk that represents your career. You have a heavy iron safe that represents your finances and investments.
And if I'm using the old ranking model, I'm treating God as just another object in that room.
Right.
I might make him a beautiful, priceless grandfather clock, and I place him right in the center of the room to show how important he is. But he's still just one object competing for floor space with the desk and the safe.
Which means your attention is constantly divided. You look at the clock, then you look at the desk, then you look at the safe.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
But the metaphor of the light suggests something entirely different. God is not the grandfather clock. He is the light bulb illuminating the entire room.
Let's test that theory. What happens when you turn that light off?
The room doesn't disappear. The furniture doesn't vanish.
My job still exists. My bank account still exists.
Mm.
But if I'm navigating that room in pitch black darkness, the experience is going to be incredibly painful.
You're going to stumble blindly.
I'm going to stub my toe on my career. I'm going to crash headfirst into my finances.
Without the light of God's presence, the texts argue, we completely misvalue the objects in our lives. This is a concept the sources refer to as correct valuation.
Correct valuation.
Yes. In the dark, our perception is warped. You might grope your way to the iron safe, wrap your arms around it, and decide that this cold metal box of money is your God. You might sit behind the oak desk of your career and decide that the desk is your entire identity, your sole source of worth.
Because you can't see the context.
Exactly. The light doesn't compete with the desk or the safe for floor space. The light is the medium that allows you to see them for what they actually are.
That is a profound distinction. The light reveals their true purpose. They are temporary resources. They are tools. They are responsibilities entrusted to us.
They are not saviors.
So if we apply this to the decisions our listeners are making every day, it means we have to stop asking the wrong questions.
We stop asking, what does the light want me to do, instead of looking at the desk?
Because that implies competition again. Instead, we use the light to look at the desk properly. We use our relationship with the divine to view our careers with absolute clarity, without turning them into idols.
The authors deepen this shift from solid object to unseen medium by introducing the concept of air.
Oh, the air metaphor. I found the critique of modern spirituality in this section incredibly sharp.
It's very direct. It challenges the modern tendency to treat faith as an optional enhancement to an already complete life. The texts refer to God not as an enhancement, but as a vital necessity.
The sources argue that we've started treating God like a daily vitamin supplement. We wake up, we take our spiritual multivitamin, maybe a quick prayer or a daily reading, to get a little boost of patience or a hit of inner peace.
And then we go out to tackle our real lives.
We treat God as an additive.
It reduces the divine to a performance enhancer for the secular world. But the air metaphor shatters that. God is not the vitamin you take before you write your to-do list.
He's the very air in your lungs that allows your biological processes to function so that you can hold the pen.
He is the concept of language that allows you to formulate the thoughts on the list. He is the physical paper the list is written on.
If you remove the air from a room, it doesn't matter how well organized your to-do list is. You will suffocate before you can execute a single item on it.
It paints a picture of spiritual suffocation in the modern workplace.
Yes. We have all these people who are incredibly successful. They have the massive desk. They have the iron safe full of money. But they are gasping for breath because they've treated the oxygen of reality as an optional supplement.
He isn't an item on the list to be checked off. He is the environment that makes the list possible.
It reorients the human perspective from one of arrogant autonomy to one of profound dependence.
You cannot schedule breathing as your #1 priority for the day. You simply breathe continuously as you do everything else. That is the architecture of centricity.
Okay, as intellectually satisfying as these metaphors are, the physics of the wheel, the structural integrity of the cabinet, the illumination of light, the biological necessity of air, I have to push back a little here.
Please do.
If we end the analysis at this point, the entire framework feels incredibly cold, it feels clinical. Physics, furniture, and oxygen are essential, but they don't exactly sound like something you can have a deep personal relationship with.
It sounds a bit mechanical.
It sounds like we are serving a cosmic mechanic rather than a loving God.
The sources anticipate that exact critique, which is why they do not stop with the architecture of reality. Once the structural framework of centricity is established, the texts immediately transition into the theological heart of the matter.
Right.
This isn't just a discussion about cosmic physics or spatial organization. It is a discussion about a household. And the core of that household is the Abba relationship.
Yes. The text Ava, the theology of intimate sonship. This is where the deep dive moves from abstract philosophy into lived human experience.
We are shifting from drawing diagrams of wheels to understanding the nature of a loving father.
To understand the magnitude of this, we really have to look at the etymology and historical context of the word Abba.
It's an Aramaic term, and it's intensely intimate. It translates much closer to dad or papa than to a formal distant title like father or sir.
In the first century context, when Jesus utilized this term to describe God, it represented a seismic theological shift.
Absolutely seismic. It moved the understanding of God away from a distant, terrifying deity who managed the cosmos from afar to an intimate, personal God deeply invested in the daily lives of his creation.
And to illustrate how this alters our daily functioning, the sources draw a razor-sharp contrast between two mindsets, the mindset of a guest in a house and the mindset of a child in a house.
The psychology of the guest mentality is fascinating. I think it accurately describes how a vast majority of people live out their faith.
Imagine you're invited to a sprawling, immaculate mansion belonging to someone you highly respect, but maybe you're also a little intimidated by them. You don't know them well. How do you behave in that space?
You are incredibly stiff. You're hypervigilant.
You sit on the absolute edge of the sofa so you don't wrinkle the cushions. You certainly don't dare open the refrigerator to grab a drink without explicitly asking for permission.
You are operating entirely out of what the sources call a spirit of fear.
Your primary psychological driver as a guest is anxiety. You're constantly asking for permission because your overriding goal is to avoid breaking the unwritten rules and angering the host.
You're acutely aware that the house is not yours, that your presence there is conditional, and you feel the heavy weight of that separation. The authors argue that the old ranking model essentially trains people to approach God exactly like this.
Can I do this? Is this movie allowed? Will I be punished if I take this job?
It is a highly legalistic, fear-based approach to existence. You are constantly waiting for the host to yell at you for touching the good china.
Contrast that with the behavior of a child who actually lives in the house. A child operates under what the texts call a spirit of sonship.
Their primary psychological driver is security.
A child comes home from school, bursts through the front door, throws their dirty backpack on the floor, and goes straight into the refrigerator to pour a glass of milk.
They do this because they know, at a fundamental level, that they belong in that space. They do not have to beg for permission to breathe the air in their own home.
It is the difference between fear-based obedience and love-based alignment. Because the child is completely secure in their belonging, their behavior isn't governed by a rigid, memorized list of legalistic rules.
Instead, as the texts point out, the child internalizes the father's values. They understand the heartbeat of the house.
That is the crucial distinction. Values over rules.
If the father's values are mercy, grace, integrity, and steadfast love, the child absorbs those values through proximity and relationship. The entire architecture of their life, the way they turn the spokes of their wheel, the way they manage the drawers of their cabinet, is built on these internalized values.
So instead of waking up and asking, what is the exact rule I need to follow today to avoid punishment, they instinctively navigate their day with the mindset of, this is simply how our family operates. This is who we are.
And this foundational security fundamentally alters the mechanics of how we make major life decisions. The sources describe this evolution as moving from seeking permission to relational consultation.
I want to dive deep into a highly specific, practical example of this, because the sources use a scenario that will resonate with a lot of professionals listening right now. Let's say you are facing a massive career crossroads.
Okay.
You've been working in the construction industry for a decade, it's all you know. But you feel this intense internal pull to pivot entirely and move into the tech sector.
That's a huge life change.
Huge. It affects your finances, your family stability, your daily routine.
Yeah.
How do you approach God about a decision of this magnitude?
Well, if you are operating with the guest mentality, the legalistic mindset, you approach God seeking rigid permission. You are terrified of making a misstep that will ruin your life or remove you from his favor.
So your prayers are essentially anxiety loops. God, am I allowed to do this? Is this specific job in tech your absolute singular will for my life? Will you punish me if I choose the wrong path?
Give me a definitive, undeniable sign so I don't accidentally break the rules. It is an approach entirely driven by the fear of losing your standing in the house.
You're paralyzed, waiting for a booming voice from the sky to hand you a signed permission slip. But how does that change if you are operating from the security of being a child of the owner?
A child doesn't grovel for permission. A child engages in relational consultation. You go to your Abba, your dad, and the nature of the conversation is entirely different.
You say, I'm feeling this strong inclination to move into the tech industry. Does this align with the values of our house? How can I use the skills you have given me in this new space?
How can I ensure that this new career honors our family name? You aren't begging like a terrified servant. You are consulting a trusted father because you inherently trust his family, his overarching plan for your life, and you know your status in the family is not contingent on picking the perfect career.
You want to ensure that this new spoke in your life, this new tech career, is securely tethered to the hub and that it protects the reputation of the family house.
You are making the decision not out of a frantic desire to avoid punishment, but out of a deep, secure desire to reflect the character of the father to the rest of the world.
It is the vast difference between obeying a dictator and collaborating with a loving parent.
It is an incredibly liberating framework. It completely removes the zero-sum pressure of the ranking model, where one wrong move on your priority list ruins your spiritual standing.
We have covered a truly massive amount of intellectual and theological ground today.
We really have.
We've torn down the broken ladder of priorities. We've engineered the physics of the wheel and the hub. We explored the structural reality of the cabinet and shattered the myth of the secular drawer.
We turned on the light, took a deep breath of the oxygen of reality, and walked into our Father's house as secure children, not terrified guests.
So the ultimate question for you, the listener, is this. How do we synthesize all of this? What is the singular takeaway that changes how you wake up tomorrow morning?
The ultimate synthesis is found in a profound shift in logic, which the sources anchor in a very specific biblical text, Romans 12:1-2.
This passage calls believers to present their bodies as a living sacrifice, and it states that this is their true and proper worship.
The sources refer to it as a breathing offering, which is a stunning subversion of how the ancient world viewed sacrifice. In the ancient context, a sacrifice was a dead animal placed on an altar. It was a localized, finite event.
But a living sacrifice means your active, breathing, moving, dynamic self is the ongoing offering.
It means that because you are a secure child operating within the entire cabinet of the Father's house, your whole life becomes an integrated, seamless act of worship.
Whether you are sitting at a desk writing thousands of lines of code, reviewing a complex budget spreadsheet, sitting in bumper-to-bumper traffic, or sitting on the living room floor playing with your children, it is all an act of worship.
There is no separation. There is no secular drawer. Your mind receives what the sources call a new lens for viewing your own reality.
And this new lens provides us with a completely new metric for success. It means it is time for you to permanently retire that old worldly question. Throw it in the trash.
You never have to ask, is God my #1 priority today? Ever again.
That question is a trap. It is a broken ladder that only leads to guilt and priority conflict.
Because asking that question forces the creator of the universe to compete with the very responsibilities, relationships, and careers that he himself has entrusted to your care.
So we replace the trap with something better. We replace it with the integrated question. As you go about your week, whatever drawer you happen to be opening, whatever spoke of the wheel you are currently turning, you ask yourself this.
Does this decision, in this exact moment, reflect the lordship and character of Christ over my whole life?
You ask yourself, does the tone of voice I am using right now with my spouse reflect the core values of the Father's house? Does the way I am managing this high-stress project at work recognize that God is the actual structure holding my career together?
It shifts the burden from a question of ranking to a question of alignment.
It changes everything. It means you do not have to feel an ounce of guilt for working incredibly hard at your job and wanting to succeed, because your job is directly tethered to the hub.
You do not have to feel like you are somehow ignoring your spiritual life when you are fully, joyfully present with your kids on a Saturday afternoon, because loving your kids is a sacred act of worship taking place inside the cabinet of His presence.
It brings a profound structural sense of peace to the human experience. The exhausting conflict between competing priorities simply disappears because there is only one true priority, and it encompasses, sustains, and breathes life into all the others.
It's a beautiful way to live.
We have dug incredibly deep into the architecture of this house today and hopefully provided a blueprint for a much more integrated life for you. But looking ahead, we have to ask the next logical, inevitable question.
There's always a next question.
Now that we understand we are secure children living inside this divine architecture, what happens when we inevitably mess up inside the house? Because we are human, and we will.
It's bound to happen.
Next time, we're going to dive even deeper into this Abba relationship. We are going to discover how the absolute, unshakable security of being a child of the owner completely revolutionizes how we handle our failures.
How we process our guilt, and how we recover from our mistakes without reverting back to the fear of a guest.
You are not going to want to miss that conversation.
It will be a vital follow-up. But before we conclude today's analysis, I want to leave you with one final, perhaps slightly provocative thought to mull over as you process these metaphors.
Give it to us.
We've established that God is the entire cabinet. He is the vital oxygen you breathe, and He is the hub of every single spoke. We have emphatically stated that there is no unsacred space. So what does this framework do to the modern concept of free time or me time?
Oh, that's interesting.
If there is truly no secular space to escape to, does that mean your rest, your hobbies, your weekend naps, and your quiet moments of doing absolutely nothing are also acts of sacred worship within the Father's house?
Wow.
How does seeing your downtime as sacred change the way you allow yourself to relax this weekend?
That is a phenomenal question to chew on. The idea that a nap can be an act of worship within the cabinet of God's presence might be the most liberating thought we've had all day. Think deeply about that as you head into your week. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. Keep learning, keep questioning the frameworks you have been handed, and we will see you next time.